Sandra. Best part of the very brief presentations looking at the investing side, which I focus mainly on, is buying and selling. No, we've definitely discussed the different aspects of a buy and sell, but for those who don't know, buying and selling is one of those opportunities where you look at purchasing a property for a specific amount, whether it be, a fixer-upper, whether it be a new build, but primarily a fixer-upper, where you try to get it under contract at a certain price, factor in what repair costs are, then also look at what you can, the ARV, which is the after repair value of that, and then look at where we are in the markets to be able to sell. There, for first-time investors, I would say the best tool to probably purchase a property would probably be, you can't really use a 403k loan, which is for a primary residence, but for buying and selling, hard money, I would definitely probably stay away from initially, just because of it's a tool and a space for more seasoned investors, because you have to pay back the hard money loan within a certain frame, usually 9 to 12 months. So that means you have to be able to purchase a property, be able to renovate it, be able to sell it within a 9 to 12 month time frame. And the reason I say 12 months also is because if you hold the property for longer than 12 months, you're now going into long-term capital gains as opposed to short-term. But at the same time, that's why a lot of hard money lenders try to cap it at about 12 months. So it's definitely a field for those who are more seasoned. So I would say that looking at buying and flipping is definitely an arena that I wouldn't ever suggest a novice person look into, just because of all the factors that go into it, particularly with the increase in build costs or repair costs that are going on right now. A lot of home goods have shot up anywhere between 50 and 60, 75% when you're looking at tiles, when you're looking at hardwood floors, when you're looking at even simple things as faucets and bathroom fixtures. All of those things have gone up exponentially since COVID. So those are things that I would definitely say that, hey, if you're looking to be a first-time investor, buying and flipping probably would be one of the last arenas I would suggest anyone get into, just because of all the intricacies that are in that. I would say, look at partnering up with someone who's seasoned in regards to buying flips and see how they go about it. And then also understand, okay, what your local municipality, how far behind they are in regards to, and I'm sure Keith can attest to this, how long it takes to get certain types of permits. If the city municipality, the city you're in has a backlog in permitting, that can hold up 2-3 months in regards to getting permits before you can even do certain types of repairs to then sell it. So that's why I believe it's probably one of the most difficult arenas to jump into in buying and selling. Next, obviously, my personal favorite, and where I've made a lot of my bread and butter, is in the buy and hold. My first purchase in 2015-16 was a duplex. I rented it out. I purchased it for 5% down. Lived in one unit, rented the other out, and used the rental income to cover the overhead until 12 months occupancy was satisfied. And then I was able to rent out the whole property and was able to purchase a rental property pretty much for 3.5% down. And that's really why I highlighted the BRRRR strategy, which if you go on larger investment platforms such as Bigger Pockets, they speak about that. BRRRR obviously stands for buy, renovate, rent out, refinance, then repeat, which is pretty much a strategy I use. And I didn't realize I was using that strategy. I heard about BRRRR after I already started. I purchased my first property. I did some renovations to it, rented out the spare apartments, got higher rents, which covered almost my whole mortgage. And I was able to take my salary job, save that money, and then do it again. So to me, I think that's probably the least risky in regards to a first-time investor is looking at buy and hold. As long as the thing I would stress is always looking at a property that the rental income more than covers your debt service. So if I would say, and most large institutional investors probably make sure that your debt service is, they use what's called a DSCR or DISC, which is your debt service coverage ratio. So if your mortgage is, we'll use a straight number like $1,000 a month, the rental income for the average, upon average or industry average, would want you to have at least $1,250 to $1,300 in rental income, because that would give you a 1.25 or 1.3 coverage ratio. So if your debt service is $1,000, the extra $250 to $300 is the cushion that they think that's probably the safe bet in regards to if you're going to purchase an investment property. I personally, again, when I first started out, didn't even know a lot about debt service coverage. I just looked at how many, I had 2 apartments. I wanted to make sure that each apartment gave me at least net, after I pay my mortgage, $300 a door. So I looked at a property that when I rented it out fully would at least cash flow me $600. Luckily, at that time, with property values being as low as they were in the Newark area, after I paid my mortgage, that first investment property, I was able to clear $1,000 every month clean. And then again, took the cash flow, saved it, and then purchased another duplex right after that. Next is wholesaling, which is something that, Sandra and I, we've spoken about previously. Wholesaling is a little, again, I think it's definitely advanced for someone trying to get into real estate initially, only because wholesaling is basically, okay, you get a property under contract. You don't intend to hold on to it, for a very long time. So you already have a buyer lined up to purchase it. So even prior to closing, you already have another buyer who you can assign over the contract. And a lot of times, depending on the contract structure, the contract may not even allow you to assign it over to someone else. But I would, it all depends on a seasoned wholesaler, is someone who's able to get a property under contract that has a caveat that says they can assign that contract over to someone else. So if I buy a property for $75,000, you would have to have, or at least the smart play, again, 25%, you would need to have a seller lined up to purchase it for $100,000. So wholesaling, going into the market, you'd have to have a good book of purchasers or buyers of properties that you have. So this way you can unload them prior to having to close on it, because then obviously if you close on the property you purchase, you got to pay closing costs, and that'll eat into your profit margins. And then you have to hold it until you find someone who can then buy it from you. And the only problem with that is when they see what is sold for, because obviously they can do a recent search to see recently sold, they'll know how much you paid for it though. So then it'll be harder for that person to offer you a lot more above asking. So if you bought a property, let's say today for 75, and then you try to sell it next month for 100, people are going to know that, you bought it for 75. So getting that extra 25K would probably be a lot more difficult. So I would say wholesaling, again, is one for someone who's seasoned, who's been in the game, who has a big book of buyers looking for opportunities, and then being able to sell it very quickly. And the last, obviously, is where the big boys play, I would say, is syndication, where you partner together with a group of investors to pool resources into a single investment. It's usually one of those where you need to have to, again, it's very capital intensive, because obviously when you start pooling resources together, looking at opportunities where you pool people together, I would say is one that where you want to look at having opportunities that are worth pooling money together, because then you have to start, depending on how many investors you get together, if it's more than a certain number, you have to report it to the SEC. So doing a smaller deal with maybe around 4 or 5 people, then you're able to pool money together. But at the same time, obviously, you have to put together on paper how the deal is going to be structured. How does everyone get paid from it? When does everyone get paid from it? And how soon do you plan to unload the property so that everyone can be made whole? So syndication is definitely the last step. That's usually where you see people pooling large pools of money together to build, whether it's ground up developments or buying apartment complexes and things of that nature. But syndication is definitely like the last step and the most profitable, but also the one that requires a lot more knowledge of the industry knowledge of contract writing, and depending on how much you're raising and who you're raising that money from, you will have to report that to the SEC, depending on the size of the deal and the people that are in, because obviously they want to make sure that people are not collecting money for real estate transactions that have nothing, that can't afford it. And then they lose their money. And then obviously that's where a lot of litigation goes into play. But again, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible just for any questions, because this is just initial one. Because I know a lot of people have been hitting me up just in regards to, getting into real estate, obviously in the new year. A lot of people are looking to that. And if anybody has any questions, I want to make sure that I'm a resource for people to use. And I'll probably do one once a month just for any, when questions may come up. But if anyone has any, please let me know.
I have one.
Sure.
I knew of one person who did this, and I don't know if you recommend, because the next property I'd like to go into is a multifamily, but I'm considering renting out what I have now and living in the next property, maybe one of the units, or just my thought. I've seen people do it like that with duplexes, where they lived in one and had a tenant in the other, and then moved on and wash, rinse, and repeated.
Yes.
So just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Is that an okay approach as a beginner?
That's honestly, to me, the easiest way to get into the real estate industry. That's obviously how I got in. Like I mentioned, my first purchase was a duplex in Newark. Found one that was actually a foreclosure that came with subsidized tenants in one of the apartments. So I knew going in, I wasn't even gonna have to carry the mortgage because there was already a tenant in there. Did I choose the tenants? Unfortunately, no. And that's another story for another day. But at the same time, at least I know going in that I wouldn't have to carry the mortgage, the whole note, because the rent almost covered the mortgage at the time was about $1,600. The subsidized tenants were paying $1,400. So out of pocket, I was only going to be paying $200 going into the deal. So what I did was obviously I used 3.5% down FHA loan, which is your primary residence loan. So even if I want to, I had to make sure that that was my primary residence for 12 months. And then after 12 months, I could rent, I satisfied the occupancy clause, moved out, moved a tenant in, and then now the property was cash flowing, like $1,100, because both apartments at $1,300. The mortgage was $16, so it netted $1,000 a month. And what I did also at that time when I moved out, I refied and moved to a conventional mortgage, which doesn't have a occupancy clause. I made sure it was. Some conventional loans do have occupancy clause. I made sure mine didn't. So this way, and then I found another property, bought it for 3.5% down, and did it again. Rented out one of the apartments because I only moved in duplexes initially because I wanted to have that extra cash flow to cover the mortgage. And what allowed me to do each time was scale up, because what a lot of people, especially I like to stress when getting into real estate investing, I love multifamilies because the spare apartments income gets applied to your overall gross income. So each property that you get, the spare apartment gets added to your overall income. So you're allowed, each property you get, you're actually able to scale up because you have additional revenue streams for every property you purchase. I think it's probably the best way to go. And obviously, speaking about the burst rate, that's pretty much what it is. And that's how I was able to scale up. And after about my fourth acquisition, that's when I scaled up and started looking at commercial properties.
I actually, like, what you shared is kind of like part of my aspirations as far as taking it in those steps.
It's probably, and I would say that of all the strategies, it's probably the one the easiest, that has the least barriers to entry. It's just, the only thing is knowing that after 12 months, you have to refi out of the FHA loan because each person's social security number can only have one FHA loan attached to it. So you can't have two. So, and if you have a property that you bought for 3.5% down, and then you look to buy an investment property, and the average investment property is going to require you to put 20% down.
20% down.
So if you have an FHA loan and you're looking to purchase maybe another, you have enough capital to purchase another property, just know that you're gonna have to have at least 20% down plus an additional 6 months mortgage and interest in reserves.
So I guess I have another question for you. When does, oh, I take it back. Is it when you are trying to obtain a multi-family unit, like, of course, more than a duplex, that they start to look at the cash flow or the potential of the cash flow? Or